Now, I've got my canvas ready. I've marked in my places where I'm going to start. I've got my needle ready with double thread and it's conditioned, and you can see because it's conditioned it's holding together nicely. And now it's to begin with the pattern. Now, as I said, we start from the top right hand corner. So I will read my graph paper from here across to there for my first row. There's my first mark, so I'm going to start here. Now if you see, we've got all our little squares, and inside of our squares we have double lines like a crosshatch, and in the middle of the crosshatch there's another little tiny dot. Now I'll just stick my pin in there so you can see this is where I'm aiming for. So I'm going to come from the back and I'm going to bring my needle through, and I'm going to bring my thread all the way, because remember I didn't do a knot. If you did a knot you can just sit the knot at the very back of that, but I like to do a little back stitch so that there's no knots. So you can see I've just left a little bit of thread here hanging at the back, and then I'm going to take a small back stitch across here. So I'll go down here and up in through there. See, and I'm using the cross hatches, not the big squares. And then I'm just going to bring out my thread, and that will give me a nice little back stitch. There we go. Now don't worry if you've got a bit of wax, it just comes off. Now you see that is well and truly supported now, and I haven't had to make a knot. And as I said, if you've got a little bit of wax there, it'll come off as we work. Now I need to come back into here, and I want to have my thread coming out of this box here ready to make my first stitch. So I'm going to go just across here into the little crosshatch and then up into the first box. There it is there. Bring my thread through. Okay, so now I turn my work. I work sideways like this, but you find your position where it suits you best. I mean, I'm working, as we see, from the top right hand side, but if you're left-handed, if you're a lefty, you might like to work from the other side. Now what we're going to do is, oh, and I've got this little thread at the back. I'm going to capture it as I go, so I'm just going to hold that down at the back, and as I sew for the first few beads I'm going to capture that thread in so I can trim it off and it'll be invisible. So I'm coming out of this box here. I'm going to go diagonally across to this box and up, a little bit like a cross stitch really. So I mean, you can see we're really fusing tapestry and cross stitch, and in a way we get a result that looks like bead weaving, but the nice thing is you don't have to learn any stitches. It's just this one simple, easy, little bit of sewing. So now you see I've popped my bead in place. It's really quite firm. Tension is very important, and that's why I use a double thread, because you'll get much easier tension if you use a double thread. If you use a single thread, you can, obviously, because you'll use half the amount of thread, but you will have to pay particular attention to your tension. So the way I get my tension is by pulling on this thread to hold it in place. Now again, I'm going to go across here, I'm going to go in here, capture that thread underneath, and then come up underneath these two little cross things and up again, pull up my bead, and then see, I pop it in place. So every time I pick up a bead and thread it on, I always make sure I pop it in place. Hold my tension down through the diagonal square, under the crosshatch, up, pull it up, hold the tension as you go, pop it in place. So you can see I've got a nice firm beads holding very well. So I'll just continue along now in my merry way until I've added my beads, and then I'll show you what happens at the other end. Now I've reached my mark on the other side, and I'll just add on one more bead. There we go. So I've gone along my whole row, just adding on the last bead, and then I'm ready to turn around and come back. Now that's really easy, because what I'm going to do is, if you see here at the end of the row, there's that little tiny mark, the tiny dot between the crosshatch. I'm just going to take my thread down there and turn it around, and I'm going to come up, because I want to be, see this bead here, there's a hole, then there's the hole underneath it. I'm going to come up in this hole here, so you can see that I'm under the first bead and I'm in the little square underneath where that thread comes out of, and then I'm ready to go. So now this time I'm going to work this way back. Now on my pattern it's another row of all blue beads, so I've got my next lot of 40 laid out, and now I'm ready to come back. And how I do that is I'm just going to pick up a bead, holding my thread like normal, but this time I want to come in on the second bead and see where that thread is. That's that same hole. So I'm going to go down and up, so just down and up into the one underneath. So we always go straight, so it's nice and easy, and I usually just hold my thread and then pull up the bead and pop him in place. And now he's sitting very nicely underneath that one, so I can just hold my thread. Remember, I like to keep a nice tension. Pick up another bead, and again, and this is what's so great about not having to use a frame, because I can bend my thread, I can bend my fabric, sorry, and come in again diagonally across up here and down again, and then I'll just, oops, sorry, bring my needle through, pop him into place, and now do the next one. So pick up another bead, down through the hole with the bead, up underneath it in a dead straight line, pull the bead in place, pop it into place, do the next one. So it's really quite easy. And then I'll carry on to the other side, so you see how I come back again. Now I've come up to my last bead, and I'm just going to put it in place, which of course is the normal up the top and down the bottom. Now here's the interesting thing. I'll just pop it in place. You're actually in position in this square to go back, but what I want to do is I want to sort of cement this little bead in place. So what I'm going to do is go down the crosshatch and then back up into that square. So I'll just go down through there and then come back up through there. Oops, there it is. Just make sure I didn't catch my thread. So you can see what I've done. So I'm just doing literally a little loop, and that's going to cement that bead in place. See, look, see how that just cemented it completely? Now I can turn around and I'm in position ready to start going back the other way. So it's just like we did before. We pick up a bead. Now of course again the third row is again a row of all blue. So I'm just going to go, if you remember, diagonally opposite, down through there, and then this time I'm going to go up into the row where you can see this thread is for these beads. So across into here and up into there. So now again it's exactly the same. So we'll just pop you in place. There we go. So see, now you've got a nice straight line there at the side, and that's what you want, because when you finish with this and you want to sew it or do something with it, you want a nice straight line. So then there we go. Now when you're doing this, it's good to bend it, because you don't want to get your needle caught up into there or caught in the threads above. So it's good to bend it. Pop your bead in place. Make sure it's sitting correctly before you begin the next bead. This peacock that we've made is still on its canvas and ready for us to create something with. But I thought it would be really interesting for you to see a finished piece still on the canvas. You can see it's very fluid. It's like fabric. It's got a lovely weight to it. And of course now it's ready for me to create something fabulous with it. It's very versatile because it's on this canvas. I could add a decorative edge. I could sew the two pieces together. I could sew fabric to this if I wanted to, or I could simply just frame it.